I'm Andrzej Marcinkowski, and I'm going to serve you as moderator today, but not only moderator, but also a speaker of one of presentation today. So, according to our agenda, we are going to start from a presentation, my presentation, titled Life Cycle Assessment Procedures and Databases. I'm going to share some part of my experience connected with LCA teaching, but I've got very hot information that at the beginning, probably before my presentation, just before my presentation, Francesco Lembo is going to say some words about probably some summary yesterday.
Hello,
Okay.
and good morning.
Good morning. So please wait a minute because I'm going to give you some words about our agenda for today, right? And then I will pass you the floor. So after the first presentation, there's going to be the second presentation given by Dr. Fritz Balkau, and the presentation is titled Current LCA Training and Capacity Building Experience in the European Union. And then we are going to move on to the two case studies from our university, Lodz University of Technology, given by, so the first case study titled Edible Packaging by Dr. Joanna Oracz and Anna Grzebczyk, and the second case study titled Appleather, given by Dr. Małgorzata Bryszewska and her student team, yes, all from Lodz University of Technology. And after this part, I mean the case study part, we are going to have some special thing, namely, I'm going to ask you, all of you, to switch on your cameras to take a common screenshot of all of us to have some memory for the future, right? And just after this, we are going, there will be for most of us, it will be the end of the event, right? But for most participants, for most attendees, it will be the end. So we are going to say goodbye. But after this part, at around 10:40, we are going to be prepared for the peer review session. And this session, the participation in this session will be restricted exclusively to project partners, and detailed instruction how to join the session will be presented just before the session, right? So be here with me, I mean the partners of LCA4Regions project. And we are going to summarize and close our meeting around 11:25, something like this. And probably that's it for now. So now, as I promised, I'm passing the floor to Francesco Lembo.
Thank you very much, Andrzej, and it will be quite quick today because we have a very full agenda. Let me take again. Hope this is visible. And please, this is an invitation. I will share immediately after the link to the access. This is especially dedicated to partners. I will share the link to the board. It is freely accessible. The learning process of this transitional learning journey doesn't end with the 3 days, but a bit of peer review keep on going after and up to at least up to the publication of the TLJ report. So I kindly invite you, especially project partners, to join the Miro board and add your comments, especially because these comments are based, as you will see, on also an interaction and resonance with personal experience. And I was so sorry of not having a specific experience in life cycle training and sustainability of the wine sector. So I'm by bit hesitated in adding comments in that section. It will be my duties to study a bit more and to add something during the day, but you're invited to integrate it. So few consideration and especially some few comments about what we discussed yesterday. Starting from life cycle training in Navarra, we have a kind of very clear focus on both carbon footprint and circular economy business model. So it's a clear commitment. We have a clear structure, maybe a bit connected to the post-pandemic, because online courses are an easy way to reach targets, even if the planning of the training activities started a bit before. But the most important part linked with the online format is that we are not talking only about training, but the clear mandate from the administration is to reach also different targets and educational levels, and also raise public awareness through having these online materials and online formats publicly available. And the number of views, it was kind of impressive. From the Chamber of Commerce, we have a more dedicated focus on business models in circular economy. And the key question that was still open about standard to measuring circularity of product life cycle. I'm leaving this question open because it can fuel further debates. There was an interesting link and topic coming after from questions to Navarra stakeholders. And one of the key points is really about trying to involve stakeholders from private and public sector in the conception of LCA trainings. This is a bit in the nature of entities like the Chamber of Commerce, but this is a big question that we had since the beginning of discussion of the first day of the TLJ. Going a bit to Kino, that's super interesting how the first connection, is about transversal dialogue, horizontal dialogue, and cooperation between procurers, suppliers, and other stakeholders, because training can't go alone, but it helps also to reinforce market dialogue. This also helps to collect common data flows and building shared tools and having concrete indicators on the effective use of shared tools by public administration. So we have a follow-up impact. We had the question of monitoring results of the training, and it was kind of an open question because educational institute often doesn't have much resources to monitor the impact on students. At least we have somewhere the impact on results of tools developed in parallel to training activities. And closing with Kino, an important focus on the change of mindset as a transversal input to all training activities. Symbol was another point to highlight, common both to Symbol. I'm trying to go a bit shorter, and also to the green competence for teachers presentation we had is how international cooperation is relevant to develop dialogue like LCA4Regions. So having international community of practices is one of the key levers to build a policy commitment from public authorities, but also develop with an international view and comparing of different point of view training course. strongly characterized the symbol experience by active involvement of trainers, and I found so interesting that participants were expressly called to say their view on sustainable construction value chains, so to imagine how to apply directly training results in their daily working life. From Kaunas University, we have a very well developed and established good practice. It is so much interesting how the two universities we had speaking, they both have sustainability embedded in transversal in different courses. From Kaunas, I liked how when Jolanta said that sustainability is embedded in university values rather than university courses. So eco-design and sustainable development are modules are present from bachelor's to PhD. And LCA is really seen as a tool to analyze the environmental impact of processed products and services. Very much interesting the note on how trained students are then employed by both public organization and private organization. That means that there's a huge connection and a strong dialogue between training institution and key stakeholders. Very pretty much interesting, even if much wider, the presentation on the two Erasmus Plus project on green competence for teachers. There was another point still didn't faced by other presentation on how to make, this is a bit common to all the big debate on STEM, but how to make green skills interesting for students, appealing for students. And again, one of the answers was found in developing design thinking. This time, not only for strategic planning, but also on educational design. And this connection of educational design and strategic planning could be another interesting key of debate for methodologies on developing training activities on LCA. Pretty much interesting that students expressed their feelings on how field activities, experimental exercise, and teamwork were the most effective methodologies, as well as the entrepreneurial skills were the ones harder to be developed. And from Slovenia, I'm sorry I didn't take many notes, but I have my written notes that will keep being implemented in the Miro board. I was pretty much interested about how the key focus was on switching from classical economical indicators, and these, when it comes to commitment of key stakeholders, which is a question that we found so much transversally in other experience. It is one of the key levers we have, because we have to find a common language to communicate relevance and importance of LCA methodologies to public organization, not only, but especially to convince private organization. I'm only reading, then it will be up to Fritz if he wants to comment them further, because this is the mail exchange we had tonight, some of his transversal comment. First one is that most training are aimed at business or academic research sector, not so much on public administration, with the few exceptions that we mentioned before. Most training is on how to undertake an LCA, not on how to implement results. And this is true because concrete application we've seen mainly on green skills, which is a much broader topic. We saw how learning is on the rise, either as entire courses or a component of courses. There were little mention on LCA association or training working groups. And there's more happening than we think, but interlinkages are still weak. So there's still a lot of competition and lack of communication between different complementary activities. I don't know if Fritz, you want to add something to your comments?
To unmute myself. Thank you, Francesco. I think you've covered it quite well. I will elaborate on some of the later points in my presentation further on in the morning, so I won't take up any time here. But the one point I would like to stress is that much of the training that we've seen so far has been on the LCA methodology itself, and perhaps less emphasis on how we use the results. And there's a whole raft of lifecycle management tools which can be used to implement the results. And I'm going to mention a little of that later on this afternoon, that this is equally important. Just undertaking an LCA to produce data that is never implemented is not particularly useful. So thanks, Francisco.
Thank you. And I'm just repeating the link to the Miro board if you want to add additional comment. Now it's open to editing.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Francesco, for your voice and your impressive chart. And thank you very much for the link. And now that's 9:15, so it's the high time for the first point of our today agenda. And this is the presentation which is going to be given by me. So I'm going to share my screen now. The presentation. Is it visible as a full screen mode? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Andrzej Marcinkowski. I represent Lodz University of Technology. I'm especially Faculty of Management and Production Engineering. And today I would like to share some part, as I mentioned before, some part of my personal experience, teaching experience connected with life cycle assessment procedure and databases. As you perfectly know, the LCA framework consists of 4 stages. We've got at the beginning called scope definition, and this is rather descriptive stage. And then we've got inventory analysis, life cycle inventory. And it consists in processing on industrial numerical data. And this is why we can say that the character of this stage is more quantitative. And similarly, the next stage, life cycle impact assessment, is going to process a lot of numerical data connected with environmental impact. And again, we can say the character of this stage is more quantitative. And then we've got the last one, interpretation. And in this case, you can also say this is more descriptive one. And this is the reason that databases and procedures are used mostly in the central sections, central stages of life cycle assessment framework. And later on, I'm going to discuss them in detail. And this is probably clear that life cycle inventory needs totally different type of databases and procedures and life cycle impact assessment. The most recognized life cycle inventory database worldwide is EcoInvent, but apart from EcoInvent, we've gotten access to a lot of different bases like this. Maybe not so fine, but there are also some databases available for everyone, even for free. And usually, procedures and databases are embedded in lifecycle assessment software like CIMAPRO, Gabi, Umberto, or OpenLCA. And usually practitioners can see what's happening between the entering data and some part results. And the phases are invisible. The procedures are treated as a kind of black boxes. But in my opinion, it's quite important for practitioners and let alone LCA experts to be aware of how the input data are processed and how the final results are obtained. In the following slides, I'm going to show the summary of my approach to make this hidden part of life cycle assessment more understandable. And here, input and output data are the basic information needed at the beginning of this first stage life cycle inventory stage. Here, we are focused on some flows. There are many different information connected with resources extracted, end products, emission, and waste. And then the flows, input and outputs, are connected into the entire process network called product systems. And when a manufacturer is going to carry out life cycle of their product, they can determine all the inputs and outputs directly connected to their process, but they don't know what are the exact flow in the supplier's processes. And this is the reason they have to use life cycle inventory databases and procedures. And in this case, the role of inventory procedure is to consider the relation between the processes and allocate the product responsibility for the proportional part of the entire environmental impact of all processes involved in such a network. Moreover, life cycle inventory databases contain the detailed information connected with industrial processes, so that the life cycle assessment can take into account that, for instance, from 100 kilograms of crude oil, we can obtain only up to 70 kilograms of fuel. And there is only up to 75% of carbon in lignite, which is very important information. And the same about iron ore. There is from 40 to 72% of iron in iron ore, and the rest is some ballast material. And now, considering some sample product with very simplified chart like this, so the product is going to be constructed of 30 kilograms of plastics and 60 kilograms of steel. So in this case, thanks to information hidden in databases, we know that we will need not 60 kilograms of iron ore, but around 100 kilograms, and the respective amounts of coal and crude oil. Electricity mix is a percentage of power output generated by various technologies. And for instance, in France, around 65% of electricity is generated by nuclear power plants, whereas in Poland, 65%, so very similar percentage, 65% of electricity is generated by coal or lignite fired power plants. From life cycle analysis perspective, the electricity mix is very important. So life cycle inventory databases contain information on environmental impact of power sector specific for different countries. And in this example, let's assume we've got a mix like this. So 60% of electricity is generated from hard coal, and 20% from natural gas, and the next 20% in nuclear power plants. So we obtain 100 kilowatt hour of electricity from respectively 30 kilograms of hard coal, together with 5,000 cubic meters of natural gas and 10 grams of natural uranium. Having the example product with a simplified network like this, we can add electricity consumption from subsequent stages and sum up them. So we've got the information that in total for the entire life cycle we need, for instance, 500 kilowatt hours. And thanks to this, the information from life cycle inventory database is also used. So we know what are the respective amounts of coal, natural gas, and uranium. Let's move on. The inventory databases also contained information on emission from particular processes. Please take this presentation, especially this part of the presentation, as a kind of case study with some specific numerical values, some specific data to follow how the numbers connected with environmental impact are processed step by step. So we've got different emission to the air. And as we can notice, CO2 emission, carbon dioxide emission, occurs in four different processes. And we can aggregate emission from the entire life cycle, having the result 1,300 kilograms together of CO2, carbon dioxide. And the same, the aggregation can be made also for methane, nitrous oxide, and sulfur dioxide. So we've got the aggregated emission. So, and the final step of inventory phase of this stage is preparation of inventory table. And here we can see the chosen entries of some substances connected with raw material extraction and emission to air, water, and soil. But here we've got a couple of information, and for a real study of real product, a table like this would contain more than 500 substances, and it is very difficult to interpret the results when we've got hundreds of results for the single product. So in the same time, so we've got an output of inventory stage in the form of the table, and in the same time, the table is an input for life cycle impact assessment analysis. Here we've got two mandatory stages, procedures like classification and characterization, and some optional ones like endpoint characterization, normalization, grouping, weighting. And now the following slides show how these procedures apply to convert inventory data into the specific environmental impact. First procedure is classification. It consists in assigning inventory data to environmental impact categories. And in this case, we've got 17 different impact categories. And the principle is like this. For instance, carbon dioxide and methane emission are assigned to category of global warming. And whereas nitrous oxide emission and assigned both to global warming and stratospheric ozone depletion. After classification, we've got characterization procedure. And this is based on midpoint characterization factors. We should determine the factors. And here we've got the example how it works. As methane affects global warming 28 times stronger than carbon dioxide, the characterization factors for, in this case, as a global warming potential are assumed to be 1 for CO2 and 28 for methane. And here we can observe the different substances with their global warming potentials expressed in kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent. And the same we can do for the next categories, every single 17 categories, but here we've got only examples of ozone depletion potential and acidification potential. Let's move on. And here we've got the example of source information. So the source data, in this case, we've got the table, the part of the table with different substances with their specific global warming potential for different chemical compounds. And in this case, the source of information is the scientific report of Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. And according to this information, we are able to calculate the results, so midpoint indicators. How to do this? So we are starting from aggregated emission. So this is the same amount as previously, we could see. And it's as easy as multiplying the result, the amounts by global warming potential. In this case, 1 for CO2, for methane, 28, and for nitrous oxide, 265. And the result is respectively like this. And because this is all of them are expressed in the same unit, we can obtain one midpoint indicator for global warming category. So instead of hundreds results, we've got only, let's say, 17. The same the same operation can be made for different categories like ozone depletion, acidification, and fossil fuel scans. Can see what's the time, because it started, yes. So okay, so that's probably the time to finish this presentation. I'm probably in the middle of all the calculations, so so maybe the last slide and some conclusion. So we need midpoint to endpoint cause-effect chain to be developed for all categories separately. And thanks to this, from like in this example for recipe method, from 17 midpoint categories through damage pathways, we are able finally to obtain 3 results only for human health damage category, ecosystems, and resources. Right, and here we've got also some operation, the results. For human health, we obtain one result, and the same for ecosystem, one result for ecosystem, and the same for resources. Right, and as I promised, because of our time framework, I'm going to jump into conclusion. So, conclusion is here. So this type of calculation and this type of approach for students seems to be very difficult. So it seems to me that it's quite difficult. Calculation, multiplication, divisions, and so on. However, in my opinion, it's very important for practitioners and especially experts to be aware of what's happening on the subsequent steps of life cycle assessment. That's why, in my opinion, that's beneficial for students, for practitioners from industry, offices, to know the hidden parts of life cycle assessment. And our Faculty of Management and Production Engineering has offered classes covering life cycle theory like this, but also practice for quite a long time. We work with post-diploma students who often work in industry, but also from offices, from public sector, the private sector, students, just students, and so on. But also in the regular curriculum for management production engineering student. And we teach both theoretical and practical during classes, and finally operation of CIMAPRO software. And the rules are clarified step by step. And the last slide. Our training potential is supported by specialized experience in life cycle assessment, which we gain during publishing scientific life cycle assessment studies, but also development of life cycle assessment methods. And I mean especially inclusion of noise impact in life cycle assessment. Yes, there is normally in regular database there are no information, no such a category like noise. So this is needed to work on it and develop the category like this. Cooperation with local authorities, but it's only incidental, unfortunately. And the same we can say about cooperation with industrial sector. It's only incidental. We can observe the lack of interest in life cycle assessment. It's not popular in Poland almost at all. And additionally, we've got insufficient own resources to do the assessment, the analysis for businesses like this. And to sum up, I can conclude like this. We've got substantial potential for training and capacity building, but unfortunately, we've got the scale of life cycle analysis activity is still limited. Thank you very much for your attention, and your questions are welcome now.
Hello everyone, this is Tomasz speaking. Maybe just an open comment to the presentation of Andrzej. Perhaps concerning the databases, we have a lot of going on concerning national accounting within LCI databases. And the challenge here is for regional assessment, because there is a big gap between the national accounts and individual or organizational processes within LCI databases, while the regions are not covered. And perhaps there is no point on creating separate, let's say, input-output databases on regional inventories, but just to work out the practice, how to deal with that. It's just an open comment and maybe a starting point for another project. So just to address your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tomasz, for your remark. Anyone else? I can't deal with the WebEx now. I'm really sorry, but I can come back to the regular view.
Perhaps stop sharing your presentation. That could help.
Okay, I'm sorry for this technical problem. What's going on? Okay. Okay, so I cannot hear any more questions, so we can go on with the next presentation. So I invite now Dr. Fritz Balkau, the independent international advisor on sustainable development, to present current LCA training and capacity building experience in the European Union. Okay, Dr. Balkau, the floor is yours.
Dr. Balkau, can you hear us?
Just a minute. Yes, I can hear now. I'm having some connection problems on this end. I'm sorry.
Yes, we understand. So
Yep.
we are waiting. Yes.
Okay, let me. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak. As most of the viewers and participants know, I'm connected with the LCA4Regions project, and I've been advising on some input to the program and the project, including on the training aspect. So I've been asked to give some insight into LCA training as it affects the regional futures. So I'm going to share my screen, just a moment. Screen share. Oh dear, just a moment. Can you see the screen now? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, we could see all the slides. Can you switch to presentation mode?
That's what I'm going to do now. Right. So, sorry for the technical complications.
This is perfect right now.
This is fine. Good. Can you hear me well?
Yes, everything is fine.
Okay, then I'll proceed. So I'm going to explain a little the training needs and opportunities for European regions. I will take into account what's happening in Poland, of course, especially as a result of some of the excellent presentations we've had in the last 2 days, but also what's happening in other parts of the EU and even what's happening in other parts of the world in terms of LCA training. Just a minute. Right. What I'm going to cover really is that the message is we live in an interconnected world. There's a variety of life cycle tools available to manage the complicated issues, but the life cycle methods require a range of competences and skills, including on the part of the public authorities. Among many stakeholders, there's insufficient life cycle consciousness and capacity at the moment to fully implement the range of life cycle methods that are available. Training opportunities exist, but are quite spread out. And what is clear is that there's not much linkage between the training centres on LCA at the moment. My other point is, which I mentioned in response to Francesco's summary, that much training is focused on the LCA methodology, but relatively less on life cycle management, i.e. the application of the results of the methodologies. So I want to cover that briefly as well, and coming up with a conclusion and needs for regional action on training. Quick recall of the context. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but just to repeat and recall that life cycles form our world. Everything seems to have a life cycle. The previous presentation from Professor Andrzej made it very clear that the life chains and life cycles exist everywhere. There are enough life cycle tools available to deal with these complex cycles and life chains, but perhaps they're not sufficiently appreciated and used. One thing we need to recall is that we have now 17 multiple simultaneous objectives in the Sustainable Development Goals. And the second one, the spillover effects, where we solve the issue of one of the SDGs merely to create a problem for another SDG. We have to be more conscious of the fact that among the many SDGs, we should be aiming to address the most important ones together rather than separately. Another quick reminder that life cycle tools are already deeply built into regional policies at the level of the European Union. This is a slide from the European Commission, the JRC in fact, which shows how life cycle methodologies, if we see at the bottom, life cycle thinking, life cycle assessment, life cycle costing, PEF, CPDs, how these are incorporated into European policies, how many European policies rely and were based on and rely for their application on the application of these life cycle tools. So it's already a fact. It's not the future, it's the present. Sometimes the question still comes up, why do we need life cycle thinking? I can think of no better slide than this one to say that a person who drives a clean car is usually unaware of the impact that the car has caused in other parts of the world, far from where he drives the car and often invisible. This is called the spillover effect, where in our attempt to achieve a cleaner result in one part of the world, we cause a problem somewhere else. Let's briefly look at a couple of life cycle assessment examples just to reinforce the breadth of application. Mostly we see LCA focused on industrial applications, on industrial products, whether it's steel or paper, or this is an example of the sustainable food management in schools, looking at carbon footprints and water footprints of what children eat in the school lunch. And a life cycle assessment brought up some really interesting conclusions from this, which led to some action to modify the school lunch. Materials flow analysis for biomass. This is a derivative. It's not a direct derivative of LCA. It's almost a parallel tool, but very important at the regional level to understand where material comes from and where it goes. This is an example of biomass. We can do the same for other forms of waste, but MFA is a critical tool for regions to understand where the issues come from and where they go. Life cycle cost. This is simple life cycle cost. The purchase cost is often what we're obsessed with. Certainly public authorities in their purchasing, public purchasing, are still obsessed with the overall simple purchase cost, and they don't understand that the majority of the costs occur later somewhere else. And this is a particularly important one, relevant one. It's becoming increasingly important because many of the issues to which we are applying life cycle assessment, we could take energy generation, for example. In fact, the social and political issues surrounding energy options are often not the technical ones revealed or the direct impacts, but the social impacts that a change of energy source would imply. And for politicians, social LCA is probably a more compelling endeavour, more compelling methodology than life cycle assessment of materials. Okay, so much for the background and some of the areas on where we need training in life cycle methodologies. So what is the training need? First, we go back to the LCA framework that we've just seen. This is from the standard LCA framework that every LCA student has come to understand. There are three areas in this, but two in particular that are often, I wouldn't say poorly understood, but treated rather lightly in the training of LCA professionals. One is the importance of spending time on goal and scope definition. In some ways, it was said that if you want a particular answer out of LCA, just manipulate the scope. So this is particularly important. It's particularly important to bring external stakeholders into this to make sure that all the key issues are incorporated in the consideration. The other one is the interpretation, saying what do the results really mean in practice? And again, this is a difficult, it is not necessarily, it's based on science, but the interpretation has to take other factors into account. So those are two areas in the LCA framework that need particular attention in the training program. Here are some of the training components that I think are particularly important when we take students through the process. The problem definition, I've just mentioned that. The range of LCA tools available. In addition to LCA, I mentioned MFA, life cycle costing, social life cycle assessment. There's a range of life cycle management tools available also. The framework we've just seen, and the key phases of the LCA process, which is being very clear about the objectives, very clear and inclusive about the scopes, the boundaries and the assumptions. Impact assessment, I think we've just seen an excellent explanation of the mechanics of the impact assessment and the results in interpretation and the implementation through LCM. So these are the components on which training needs to take place in order to get a result out of the process that is in conformity with our objectives of the 17 SDGs right along the life chain. What this means is that we are involving a variety of stakeholders in the life cycle training, either as providing support to life cycle training or as targets of the training. And there are a number of targets in this that are not much involved in life cycle training generally at the moment, including public authorities, for example, governments, policy applications, yes. But these are the important stakeholders that we need to associate with training programs to ensure that their needs, their inputs and their needs are met. Inputs in particular, public authorities are involved in the scoping phase to make sure that the priority issues that they're concerned, as I just said a moment ago, if we're looking at energy options and life cycle assessment of energy options, the social implications are particularly important. The public authorities will have much input to make in terms of the social implications of the energy transition. Here we have, it's more of a recall than a message. These are some of the areas in which we see now life cycle training taking place in some shape or form. Eco-design, it's quite common. Materials flows, assessment of products and services, this is very common. Chemical hazards, we're looking into some of the more environmental life cycle management issues, such as eco-labels, EPDs, material safety data sheets, and so forth. Sustainable procurement, social LCA as an assessment methodologies, and materials management generally. These are some of the capacity building areas that we need to address in order to build competence in the various stakeholders and partners. Commissioning an LCA, of course, much LCA research is taking place in a, if we like, a confined environment of the research community. But if we're looking at using LCA to support public policy and public authorities in their decision making, the commissioning of an LCA requires particular attention, and the clients of such an LCA need to be involved right from the beginning, need to understand how an LCA works. Undertaking the LCA exercises, this is common currency of LCA as we see it at the moment. Building regional databases, we've had an explanation of that also. I would say nevertheless that regional databases are currently overall generally insufficient for a regional materials flow analysis. Most materials flow data is collected at the national level, not at the regional or municipal level. So we have to start all over again if we want to apply MFA at the regional level. Evaluation of LCA studies and reports. It's not enough to simply present the LCA report to the client and say, thank you very much, where is my check? We have to take the client through an evaluation of the significance of the LCA and what it means. Implementing the results through lifecycle management and ultimately training the trainers. These are some of the competences that we need to build. There's certainly quite a good deal of strength in some of these, but there is still some way to go in certain other ones, training the trainers among others. Let's quickly look at some of the existing training venues. It's not all dark, a lot is happening already, and I've selected just a few examples from the plethora of information that we can find, both online and in our own particular networks. We have e-learning packages which are commonly available. In particular, the Lifecycle Initiative e-learning package produced by UNEP and its partners through the LCI is free, of course. One-click LCA, it's a commercial package, but it's also much used and increasingly used. We have a number of structures and a number of venues for training on LCA and its various adjuncts. The International Lifecycle Academy based in Spain, the FSLCI Summer Schools, and the Education Working Group of the Forum for Sustainability on Lifecycle Innovation. This is the LCI again. And the training kit material that's available. The European Platform on Lifecycle Assessment, the University of Bordeaux as a centre of expertise for lifecycle assessment of advanced materials and resource management, Imperial College London. These are not the only ones. I've just selected a few that I know perhaps a little better than some of the others, but there are others available, including, as we heard on day one of this particular event, the very thorough initiatives now taking place in the Technical University of Lodzkie. There are a number of existing training venues that are very international. This is the one from the USA. It is just finished, September 21-24, run as a virtual conference. There are similar training venues in other regions. Just a quick look what's happening in some of the partner countries. When I say partner, a partner in the LCA4Regions project, there are things happening in the partner countries. Sometimes it comes up as a surprise. Sometimes we know about these already. Finland, Lithuania, Italy, Lombardy, Navarra, Poland. I'll do some more on Poland in a moment. Portugal, Slovenia. These are some of the initiatives that we already see in partner countries. Sometimes they can be expanded. Sometimes they're running quite well. Let me cover the initiative in Poland that we heard on day one, the Lodz University of Technology, teaching modules in specific areas, but also the teaching module on LCA for bachelor's courses. As Jolanta has already mentioned, this is a really worthwhile initiative to go down into the bachelor's courses to introduce LCA for everyone. It's not only for specialists. And I really congratulate the university for launching such an initiative so that all professionals understand a little better the use of life cycle assessment and its transformation into life cycle management. One initiative that I failed to follow up, the Polish Centre for Life Cycle Assessment, I tried hard, but I could not find anyone who could give me some information of the current status of this centre. So in the Q&A at the end of this presentation, perhaps we could discuss briefly the status of the Polish Centre for Life Cycle Assessment and, in general terms, what such a centre could be used for to advance the agenda of life cycle assessment generally, more broadly than can a single university. Here's some further initiatives in the faculty of the Technical University. This is pure internet search. I regret that I have not met these people personally, nor communicated with them, but already there's information available on the website of the university of some of the initiatives that are occurring. And we've heard some of these and some further ones in the previous 2 to 3 days. Back to the LCA4Regions project and its partners. An important strand, an important objective of this project is learning from each other. This is the very fundamental basis of the Interreg projects, regions learning from each other. So what are the regions, the partner regions of this project learning from each other? Well, we look at good practices, we see interesting things happening, some questions being asked, but we could strengthen the intensity with which we look at others' good practices and see if some of these ideas could not be introduced in our own region. The P2P, peer-to-peer review, could have a stronger focus on LCA lessons learned, not only on circular economy and on waste management, but particularly what the lessons learned have been in terms of furthering the use of LCA methodologies, and perhaps even including additional P2P workshops to cover some of the areas that we haven't been able to cover in regions so far. Just to give you some sense of what the 7 partner regions have, how the 7 partner regions have been applying life cycle methodologies, both assessment and management. This is just an extract from part of the news service of the project. The list is much longer than this, but this is what several of the regions have been, how some of these regions have been applying life cycle methodologies: carbon footprints, LCA, resource efficiency, green public procurement, and other methodologies. The list is quite long, and it's really encouraging to see such a widespread application of life cycle methodologies among the partner regions. While the project itself is designed to learn from each other, a little club of 7 partner regions, even if it has quite a lot to share, it's not the whole world. So sometimes it's also worth looking a little further. Some of the presentations in this in TLJ have been useful in looking a little bit further, but we could search out regional LCA expertise in further regions and further stakeholders. The use of LCA to create business opportunities. This is something which is perhaps an unrealized opportunity at the moment. I've seen and heard many comments about the cost of LCA. We see relatively less about the opportunities of LCA. And there are several, or 2 examples that we can share. The Australian colza, this is oilseed exports, gained, sorry, I have to go back. Australian colza exports are now worth several $billion, billion euros, as a result of LCA's study of the colza production, oilseed production process itself. The European Union was favouring products that were organic, free of pesticides. The LCA of the Australian oilseed industry convinced the European Union that the Australian oil was good quality, and at the end of it, there was a multi-billion-dollar export contract. We've seen on day 1 the PVC products of a company, sorry, I don't have the name now. It's Mr. David who presented the export of PVC products to Holland and to other countries as a result of LCA studies. I think we need to put much more emphasis on using LCA to create business opportunities and focus a little less on the costs. There are some costs, but I prefer to see an LCA not as a cost, but as an investment. I would encourage regional universities to expand their content on LCA. I think the Technical University has taken a very important first step in bringing LCA into the undergraduate levels. Other regional universities, I would encourage them to see if that would not be appropriate in their institution also. This one is my comment of where is the LCA association in Poland? Indeed, where is it in the partner countries? And what is the value of a national club a national LCA association, to build bridges to other national or regional partners who are doing something, but whose work may not be that well known and not that well promoted. I'm at the moment parallel processing. I'm also involved today in the final day of a summer school on life cycle methodologies for the building and construction sector. This is the 10th regional summer school that FSLCI has run. We have 30 students, we have 30 speakers and faculty members to spend 21 days with the students in this LCA summer school to build skills, build awareness, build skills, and create networks. So these are all opportunities for looking a little further in the LCA training area. Sorry. So let's go back to the message. We live in an interconnected world. We need LCA. A variety of LCA tools is available to better manage it. It requires a broader range of stakeholder competences than we've assumed in the past. For many of the stakeholders, there is insufficient life cycle consciousness. And the first step is to build this consciousness before we can build their capacity. It's clear that training opportunities exist, but are quite spread out and not particularly well connected. And finally, most training is focused on LCA methodology, but not particularly deep on life cycle management methodologies. And many of the stakeholders and many of the clients of LCA need assistance and capacity built on life cycle management. So the leitmotif is think globally, act locally, start now. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Balkau. And especially, I would like to appreciate your emphasis on the significance of Codex co-definition with respect to results of life cycle assessment. And also you mentioned about some people, some workers of our Lodz University of Technology who deal with life cycle assessment. And I have to add that, yes, there are a couple of people dealing with life cycle assessment, but mainly they represent different faculties. And there was almost no cooperation between us and the common curriculum for every single bachelor degree. So it was the first step on the way to connect our strength in this. Okay. Do you have any questions to Dr. Balkau?
I have a comment again on Polish Center on Life Cycle Assessment. This initiative was brought out by some colleagues of mine, LCA experts and practitioners. It was, I think, a little bit ahead of LCA and circular economy mainstreaming times. So did they fail to get enough attention, enough projects, enough research as an organization, as a unit? So all of my colleagues, they are working with LCA still from this for all this period, working individually or working together with some research projects, some public also cooperation, or some individual industrial players, so they work on it. But I think the reason for this Polish Center of Life Cycle Assessment not succeeding so broadly is related to the point of your presentation as well. So we are still lacking a lot of networking within LCA scope. And I think lack of consciousness, awareness of potential role of LCA within policy making or business models was the main reason for the failure. I think now it's a much better climate for it. The Polish Center for Life Cycle Assessment still exists, and perhaps now it could act more openly as a unit. This is just a comment to your inquiries. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much
Sure.
for your comment.
Could I respond to that?
Of course.
Sure.
I think it's a valid comment. I think that Poland is not the only country in which this type of situation is developing. In many countries, the linkages between institutions, we see the universities as competing rather than cooperating, and this spills over into the creation also of some associations. But my main point is that research on the LCA, which is very much the specialty of academic institutions, research on LCA remains very important, and the training on that also. But it's high time that we started training the clients of the LCA, the people who are expected to do something with it. And we've seen from the slide of the European Union that at the European level, many of the government policies have had a very strong LCA input. So the European Union was the client. So when we start seeing the policymakers as the people who have to do something with the LCA, we understand that they are not very well informed, and they're a little bit afraid of the complexity of it also, as we've heard mentioned before. So the training needs are not only for the researchers, the training needs are also for the clients and other stakeholders.
Okay, thank you very much. And according to our time framework, we should start the next item of our agenda now. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Fritz Balkau, for your interesting presentation. Thank you very much for attention. The rest of the attendees.
Thank you.
So the next point for today is case study, and the first case study titled Edible Packaging will be given by Dr. Joanna Oracz and Anna Grzelczyk from Lodz University of Technology.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Screen. Okay.
You can see your presentation in the full screen mode. Everything works perfectly.
Thank you. At the beginning, I would like you to imagine how much you throw away any leftover food and various packing. This will allow...
Excuse me to interrupt you, but could you be so kind and increase your voice volume?
Okay, I will try to look where is... Maybe now is better.
Yes, it's far better. Thank you very much.
Okay. At the beginning, I would like you to imagine how much you throw away the leftover food and various packing. This will allow you to illustrate how important our project is for the environment. There are 5.26 trillion pieces of plastic that scrapes in the oceans. and as much as 13 billion tons trash in Poland. Thousands of seabirds and sea turtles, seals, and other marine mammals are killed each year after ingesting plastic or getting inhaled in it. We are breathing microplastic, eating and drinking plastic infused water every day. Over 88 billion tons of food waste is generated annually in the world. Importantly, about 3.7 billion tons of this waste is generated by agri-food companies. Around 1.3 billion tons of food are wasted in Poland. During the year, one person in Poland have wasted 181 kilos of food. This is really big value if you injection. Importantly, about 39% of this waste is generated by agri-food companies investing search for ideas for their developments in underway. These problems inspired us to create biodegradable disposable tableware from food waste. Sustainable development and the idea that the needs of the present generation should be full satisfaction, but not at the expense of the future generation in the practical balance by our team. The development technology assumes the use up to 65–90% of various vegetables and fruity products waste in the manufactures of packings and disable utensils. The manufacturing methods used and recipes development assume the use of natural rough materials only, without the use of chemical components. What is important, we have a 5-stage production allows reduce the amount of carbon dioxide. Carbon footprint will reduce in as product at minus 463.75. The product life cycle stage is the food processing industry produces large volume of food waste. The first step is to obtain plant waste. Then the products of packing and dishes, next successive distribution, and the last important of the stage of the life as product. The product can be either be eating, or at the same time, such packing has an additional advantage, which is quickly biodegradation. The world market is only 1% of biodegradation packaging. This is really important because we have still a high demand for such that product. Currently, reusable packing and disposable tableware are products from various types of biodegradable polymers. In the order to obtain biodegradable polymers, chemicals, components that are not environmental friendly are often used. Such products also generate high carbon dioxide emission to the atmosphere. Dissolvable packing and utensils made from plant products such as clears are available on the market. However, they use of materials with consumer characteristics which are not difficult to manage as waste. They constitute some food. In the world, deposit over products of food, many countries are still struggling with malnutrition. The benefits of our products is environmental protection, four-step production, low production cost, desserts product, and as product is vegan. What is important, from 1 ton of pasta, we produce 5 or 16,000 packings. Why 16? Because we have different various size as packing. What we can have problems, what we need doing in the future. We need to look if we can storage as a product in a cold storage. We need to see if sanitary inspection is clear for us products, and if the consumer will want to eat our products. We want to say about education. Education about food waste management can be introduced as early as preschool. It is important to teach children that the food cannot be wasted and to care of the environment. By implementing good habits, we can develop various creative ideas about what to do with waste. Anyone can help the environment if they want to. Today's world gives us many tools at our fingertips. The biggest initiative in creating our idea was not knowledge, just knowing that we want to change something in the world. The knowledge and skills acquired from the university allow us analyze our products in the terms of quality. Our product was created at the Lodz University of Technology in a 3-person teams consisting of Joanna Grzeczek, Joanna Oracz, and Ilona Gałązka-Czarnecka. Thank you for your listening to our presentation.
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation with information about edible packaging. And I've got a request for you. Please stay with us because the question session will be just after another case study titled Appleather. And here the presentation about which will be provided by Dr. Małgorzata Byszewska with her team of students from Tabande, excuse me for my pronunciation, and Jakub Jędrasz. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Małgorzata Byszewska. One moment. And together with Stefan Tabande and Jakub Jędrasik, we will present the result of our work carried out as a part of PBL project. Before we move to that, a few words of introduction. I am a teacher at Biotechnology and Food Science Faculty, and among the subjects that I teach is PBL. Actually, I cannot say teach PBL because in this particular course, it is very important not to teach, but to give students space for self-study, let them take ownership on the project design, use their creativity, innovative thinking, and develop their communication and team building skills. PBL is a student-centered pedagogical approach, but problem and process orientations are equally important. The main components of the process can be identified as it is shown on the graph as analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. My role in this process is to provide real-life problem and then facilitate the teamwork. Sometimes, if it is necessary, redirect the work, give an advice, help to solve problems if they appear. Last semester, I presented to the students a problem described in this short text titled Apple Peels, the Resource of the Future. On the preparation step, I always try to combine information that potentially could become directions for the project development. In this case, it was apple can be used for preparation leather-like material. Then, the development of vegan leather market is expected in the coming years. This market has unsolved problems, one of which is not to being completely plastic-free. And finally, apple waste may still be a rich source of biologically active compounds. And now, let students present how they define the problem, the ideas that they developed, the prototype that was created, and finally the results of its testing.
Our material is a type of vegan leather. So before we begin, I would like to briefly explain this term. Vegan leather is a leather-like material which doesn't use any real animal skins. Consequently, this material is cruelty-free and doesn't contribute to the suffering of animals, which normally have to be killed to obtain regular leather. This type of material is therefore favored by vegan people who are opposed to the killing of animals. Vegan leather also has a few other names: pleather, fox leather, or it can simply be called artificial or synthetic leather.
Vegan leather industry is estimated to be as worthy as $90 billion by 2025. So the first question that comes to our mind is that who is interested or who are the stakeholders of such leathers? During our desk research, we identified the stakeholders and categorized them into 3 groups. The main stakeholders are vegan leather producing companies, for instance, Beyond Leather, Frumat, Fruit Leather Rotterdam, and moreover, large companies such as Tesla are also raising their interest in the use of vegan leather in the recent years. Ecologists are another group of vegan leather advocates, since the leather is produced from 100% natural biodegradable materials, and in fact the leather can be eaten by various strains of yeast and bacteria. The last but of course not the least group of stakeholders are vegans. As the name suggests, no animal skin is being used in vegan leather, and this is why this type of leather is quite popular among vegans. Nowadays, artificial leather producing companies try to eliminate the use of plastics and polymers due to their environmental pollutions harming nature and organisms, long-lasting degradability which can take thousands of years, and in general, plastics are originated from fossil fuels like crude oil, and their production releases greenhouse gases contributing to global warming. For those reasons, we began searching for alternative materials which could be used to replace plastics.
So after doing research into the way that vegan leather is currently produced, the objective of our project became quite clear. Our goal was to create a new type of vegan leather which was free of harmful plastics. What is more, we wanted our material to be based on recyclable resources. We aimed to use resources that would otherwise end up in landfill. And that's how we turned our attention to apple waste products. The annual production of apples in the world is estimated to be 83 million metric tons. A significant portion of this entire amount goes to the apple juicing industry. About 75% of fresh apple mass can be extracted as juice, and the leftover 25% is collected as a food waste, the so-called apple pomace. The global production of this apple pomace is around 4 million metric tons each year. So instead of going to waste, this enormous supply of biomass can be reused to manufacture some useful products. For instance, our Appleather.
One of the main items we used to produce Appleather was cellulose that was obtained from Kombucha scoby. Kombucha or tea mushroom is a fermented drink obtained from scoby floated in black or green tea. It is originated from China, and in recent years, this drink is getting more and more popular around the world. SCOBY stands for Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast, and it contains various types of bacteria such as lactic acid and acetic acid bacteria. When the SCOBY is fermented, the kombucha drink alongside with the bacterial cellulose are produced. So in fact, the bacterial cellulose is a biomass that is used in Appleather. Now we're going to see how this process was done in our project.
We filled a few plastic containers with strong black tea with sugar and some amount of the kombucha drink. Then, Small pieces of SCOBY that we purchased on the internet were placed on the surface of the liquid. The containers were kept out of the sun and at room temperature for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, we obtained a thick layer of bacterial cellulose that you can see on the right-hand side. So at that point, we wanted to modify the obtained bacterial cellulose by treatment with chemicals and by adding apple powder. So this part of the process consisted of 2 main steps, pre-treatment and post-treatment. In pre-treatment, the material was swelled with sodium hydroxide. This was done in order to remove all of the microorganisms that were present on the surface of bacterial cellulose. We also used acetic acid to change the pH. Additionally, bacterial cellulose was bleached with hydrogen peroxide. The post-treatment process involved infusing the bacterial cellulose with glycerol and apple powder. The combination of those 3 components allowed us to obtain Appleather.
Appleather can be used in fashion and clothing to make handbags, keychains, jackets, shoes, and etc. Here we can see a relatively large piece of Appleather, and it is as big as an A4 sheet of paper, and it can be easily folded, as you can see in here. In order to check the durability of the leather, a prototype card holder was made and used over a month. As you can see, no significant changes were observed, and therefore it can be concluded that the sustainability of Appleather is quite high for a short-term use. We also tried to dye some pieces of Appleather, and here we have 2 colors in orange and black, and they have same properties as plain Appleather, and hence color diversity is another advantage of Appleather in fashion industry.
Now I would like to go over the main advantages of our material. So first of all, Appleather is fully biodegradable and doesn't contain substances that could be harmful to the natural environment, for instance plastics. As we found out during laboratory testing, the material has high tensile strength, which means that it is resistant to pulling and stretching. And finally, as my colleague has just shown you, the material can be dyed very easily, which makes it an attractive alternative for the production of various consumer articles.
At the beginning of the project, prior to getting Appleather, we conducted a survey to assess how people liked the idea of making leather from such materials. Nearly 50% of respondents expressed a positive opinion about it. Also, after obtaining our bioleather, we conducted another survey in which we presented the properties and pictures of Appleather, and this time over 74% of respondents said that they would use Appleather instead of real or other artificial leathers. For more information, you can also scan the QR code, which could take you to our article on Student Life magazine of Lodz University of Technology. And by this, we get to the end of the presentation. Hope you enjoyed the journey through our Appleather project, and thank you so much for your attention. We're all ears for your comments and questions.
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. And I must admit that this is the first time I hear about this case study, although the case study is run at my university. So once again, thank you very much. And now we've got the time, but very little time for the very short question and answers session. Does anyone would like to ask some question?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Quick one. The obvious question at this part of the 3-day program of the TLJs, are you planning to do an LCA of your leather to convince future clients with numbers as well as with statements?
Probably we will do that because the results of our work are really promising. So we are thinking about the next steps, and at the moment we created a collaboration with another faculty, fashion faculty. So probably the next step it will be LCA analysis.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. And I can see some additional questions on chat. Does your result published about Appleather.
Yes, we are going to do that. One of the publication is that one in Życie Uczelni, and another one, more scientific, is now in preparation.
I see. I cannot hear any more questions. So once again, thank you very much for your experience and your share with us.
Thanks.
And now, this is a special time to say goodbye, but not for everyone, but only for people who are not members of project. And also, I got the information that the stakeholders of the partners also may stay here in the general room, so here. But now, this is the very tough task to organize the peer review session. And I got the further instruction, but before it, I would like to thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you, everyone, to attend here, to share your experience. And I hope and I believe that the experience that gained here during our 3-day journey will be fruitful for the future, and all of us can have the benefits from this experience. Thank you very much for your attention and for your activity here.